At 1:05, lifeboat number 1 leaves with just 12 out of a capacity of 40. The evacuation was now complete chaos. Boat number 1 got tangled on rigging wire as it was lowered, and passengers suffered accidents and injuries as it progressed. One woman fell between lifeboat number 10 and the side of the ship, but then someone caught her by the ankle and hauled her back onto the promenade deck, where she was able to make a second attempt at boarding. First-class passenger Annie Stengel had several ribs broken when 2 men jumped onto lifeboat number 5, which was still near enough to the ship. It squashed her and knocked her unconscious. Coronia messages another ship, Baltic, the Titanic needs assistance. Baltic messages back to Coronia that they received that message. At 1:05, the portable suction pipe that was hooked up in boiler room 4. 1:07, Titanic sends another CQD SOS message you see here. Olympic sends a message to Titanic. Who has struck an iceberg? Titanic. We have struck an iceberg. Tell your captain. Olympic. Received. Okay. At 1:08, Cincinnati messages Titanic. We hear you. Do you require assistance? Titanic. Yes. 1:10, Titanic sends another CQD SOS message out. You see here. Water is now flooding into boiler room 5 and also flooding from the bow up Scotland Road, which was the portside hallway to the cabins on the E-deck. At 1:12, Titanic sends another CQD message you see here. Olympic replies, have informed captain immediately. Baltic messages Titanic, cannot hear you, repeat again. 1:14, Titanic sends a message you see here. Asian messages the Titanic that they've informed captain, requesting the position again because the signal is faint. Virginian tries calling Titanic, but there's no response. Cape Race Station messages the Virginian, report to the captain the Titanic has struck an iceberg and requires immediate assistance. At 1:15, flooding reaches the grand staircase on the E-deck. Murdoch and some members of his crew rush from the forward starboard to the port aft side to aid in trying to quell the growing crowd of disgruntled men who are not allowed to board lifeboats. 1:16, male passengers near boat 14 get more of a panic at not being allowed to board. So able-bodied seaman Joseph Scarrett has to actually push them away with a boat tiller to make room for more women to board. At 1:17, Titanic messages Olympic. The captain says to get your boats ready. What is your position? Crew manning the suction pump in boiler room 4 notice water coming from the stokehold plate instead of overhead. So this creates worries that there's damage to the underside of the ship as well. At 1:17, Carpathia messages Titanic, we are coming your way, coming at full speed, 15 knots. Titanic receives the message. Frankfurt messages Titanic that they're coming too. Titanic, okay, thanks. 1:18, the D-deck portholes near the bow start to submerge in the water. 1:19, Titanic sends out another CQD SOS message that you see here. Water now is already a foot deep in boiler room 4, so workers abandon the room. Starboard list is still 1.0, head trim is now 4.0. At 1:20, lifeboat number 16 is lowered, 53 of 65 seats full. Olympic calls the Titanic. There's a huge crowd of male passengers gathered at the port side, which leaves the lifeboats at the starboard aft virtually empty. So Officer Murdoch is looking around to try to find people to board lifeboat number 9. At 1:22, Titanic messages Olympic to get their boats ready and asks their position. Baltic messages the Coronia to tell Titanic that they are on the way and 243 miles east. 1:25, lifeboat number 14 lowers with 40 of 65 seats filled. 1:26, Baltic messages Titanic, we are making for you, keep in touch with us. On deck, Lowe fires 3 warning shots into the air when he sees a whole bunch of third-class passengers looking like they are going to jump into the boat number 14 as it lowers. At 1:27, Frankfurt messages Titanic. Titanic has been almost motionless for close to an hour, but now boiler rooms 4 and 5 are flooded, resulting in an increase of sinking at the bow. The Virginian tries calling Titanic. Cape Race messages Virginian to report Titanic's situation to their captain. Virginian receives the message. At 1:28, the Baltic messages Caronia again to tell the Titanic that they are coming. Titanic messages the Baltic, CQD, CQD. At 01:30, the loading of boat number 12 is delayed by a couple of events: the lowering of number 14 and the trying to quell the rowdy crowd. Boat number 9 is lowered at that time, 40 of 65 seats full. Boat number 12 is eventually lowered, 42 of 65 seats full. At 1:31, Olympic messages Titanic, but the reply is unreadable. At 1:32, the Virginian messages Cape Race that they are 170 miles north of Titanic and on their way to help. Cape Race messages Titanic that Virginian is on the way. Titanic receives the message. At 1:32, the starboard list is now 0. Head trim is 4.0. Titanic sends a CQD message out with their coordinates that you see here. At 1:33, number 11 begins loading. Murdoch yells, "Women and children first!" at a group of men looking like they're going to jump into the boat. At 1:35, boat number 11 lowers with just 50 of 65 seats full. Remember that portable suction pipe in boiler room 4? It's connected to the bilge system and begins charging water out the openings beneath boats number 11 and number 3 that are being lowered. At 1:36, there's another flurry of radio messages. Caronia messages Titanic to let them know that Baltic is on the way. Titanic messages Baltic to get their boats ready. Caronia messages Titanic that they are on the way and keep in touch. Titanic receives the message. Olympic messages Titanic to ask if they're steering southerly to meet them. Titanic says, "We are putting women off in boats." Olympic says they received the message. Baltic messages Titanic again, they are on the way. But they don't seem to get a reply. Baltic messages Caronia that they don't appear to have reached Titanic with their message. At 1:39, Titanic now begins listing to port. This is discovered while boats 13, 15, and 10 are being loaded. Boat number 10 swings 2.5 feet from the boat deck while it's lowering. The starboard list is 0, head trim is 4.0. At 1:40, boat number 13 is lowered, 55 of 65 seats filled. Port list is 0, head trim is 4.0. The Yapranga messages Titanic, position 38 north, 50 west. Caronia messages Titanic. At 1:41, boat number 15 is lowered. It rubs along the hull of the ship because of the port list, which is now 1.0. By 1:42, the port list is 4.0. Then by 1:43, the port list is 7.0. Titanic sends a CQ message out that their engine room is getting flooded. Then they send a message CQD SOS that you see here. Baltic messages Titanic that they are 200 miles east and on the way. Now the port list is 8.0 and the head trim is 4.0. At 1:44, Captain Smith orders Officer Boxhall into Lifeboat 2, which is about to lower. Boat number 10 is still lowering. Chief Baker Jokin is on the deck tossing children into boat number 10, where they are caught by Steward Evans. The A-deck windows are opened to allow passengers to load boat number 4, which has now been cut loose from the rigging wire that previously entangled it. A makeshift ladder bridge is made out of deck chairs. The Carpathia messages the Titanic that Baltic and Olympic are on the way. Titanic message, "Come as quickly as possible. The engine room is filling up to the boilers." Carpathia receives the message. At 1:45, boat number 2 is lowered with only 17 of 40 seats filled. The port list is now 9.0. Head trim is now 5.0. Olympic messages Titanic, "What weather have you had?" Titanic, "Calm and clear." At 1:46, officers have issues releasing the falls for boat number 11 so that it can row away. People in the boat begin to panic, which is made worse by the discharge of the water nearby from the bilge that's pumping out from the boiler room 4. 1:46, Baltic calls the Titanic, no response. At 1:47, flooding has reached the well deck, which is below the boat deck. The Marconi room operators, Phillips and Bride, get ready to put on their life belts, but then Phillips returns to the radio and continues sending messages. The Coronia hears signals from the Titanic but cannot read them. Frankfurt also messages Titanic, "Are there any boats around you already?" Burma calls the Titanic, Carpathia calls the Titanic. Then the Titanic messages Carpathia, "Come quick, she's taken on water, it's full up to the boilers." 1:48, Carpathia replies to Titanic that all their boats are ready and they are on the way. Titanic replies, "Come as quickly as possible." 1:49, boat number 2 only has one crewman, so passengers have to row the boat themselves. They go about 100 feet and then stop to watch the ship sink. Olympic sends to Titanic that they are on the way. Titanic receives the message. At 1:50, boat number 10 is lowered, 57 of 65 seats full. Boat number 4 is lowered, 30 of 65 seats full. Captain Smith orders crew to stop firing rockets now to set up boat number C on the starboard side. Port list is 9.0, head trim is 5.0. The condenser discharge running off the ship pushes boat number 13 backwards or aft, so it has to be cut loose while it's being lowered so that the number 15 won't be lowered on top of them. At 1:51, Captain Smith blows a whistle to order portside boats to come back since they're only half full. Quartermaster Hitchens in boat number 6 refuses to turn their boat back to the ship to save their own lives. Boxhall in number 2 hears Captain Smith's order and begins rowing aft, intending to go back to the gangway doors to pick up more people. Titanic sends a message from their radio room, "Fool, you fool! Stand by, stand by, stand by and keep out, keep out." This confuses some of the ships who begin messaging. Baltic messages Coronia, "We are heading for Titanic, but I can't agree to signals." Coronia messages Baltic that Titanic sends CQD and that their engine room is flooding. At 1:52, Baltic messages Titanic that they are 243 miles east. At 1:53, boat number 4 reaches the water but has to have the falls cut. The crewman in the boat calls up for more help in the boat. Lightoller sends 2 crewmen shimmying down the falls. Water now is only 20 feet below the A deck. At 1:54, a group of male passengers boarded lifeboat number D, only to be threatened with a revolver by Lightoller to get them out. Crew on deck then lock arms to prevent men from boarding before women and children. Coronia hears Titanic signaling but cannot decipher. At 1:55, Chief Baker Jochen begins throwing deck chairs and loose items and furniture into the water for people in the water to grab onto. Titanic messages out, just to random, that they are putting women in lifeboats. Asian messages Cape Race that Titanic can't seem to hear them. Steward Nichols, back on the Titanic in number 15, notes that the starboard propeller is now halfway above the water. 1:57, Captain Smith orders the operators in the wireless cabin to go ahead and leave to save themselves. Operator Phillips, however, continues sending messages. He sends a message, "Engine room full up to boilers." Frankfurt messages Titanic that they are 172 miles from the first SOS. At 0200, Officer Murdoch gives the last call for boat number C. White Star Line chairman and managing director J. Bruce Ismay gets on board. This was viewed as controversial later on and cowardly, since 1, he was neither a woman or a child, and 2, he could have technically been considered part of the crew. Many felt he should have stayed on board. Titanic sends a message, CQD, SOS, that you see here. The Asian calls the Titanic, no response. The Frankfurt calls the Titanic, no response. The Virginian messages Titanic, Olympic is heading for you. Cape Race messages the Virginian that although Olympic is on the way, the Virginian is closer. Boat number C lowers with 43 of 40 seats full. Finally, we have a fully packed boat. The drastic port list makes it take longer to lower, even though it's only 20 feet above the water. The stern propellers are now fully out of the water. At 2:01, Operator Phillips tries 2 or 3 times to contact the Carpathia to tell them that they are abandoning the ship, but receives no reply. At 2:02, power up to this point has been slowly reducing, but now it begins to quickly reduce. The lights on the A deck appear a reddish hue as they're fading. The Virginian replies to Cape Race that they are speeding up. Titanic sends a message out that you see here. It will stand by given. 2:03, officers Wild and Lightoller order passengers to the starboard side in order to try to straighten out the ship list. The port list is 8.0, the head trim is 5.0. Titanic sends a CQD message out twice, then once more, you see here. Officer Boxhall orders the boats in the water to row away from the ship due to fear of getting swamped at the starboard gangway. Titanic repeats the CQD message twice. At 2:04, officers have loaded as many women as they can onto boat number D. Titanic sends a CQD message again 3 times. The port list is 8.0, the head trim is now 6.0. Titanic sends a CQD message again. At 2:05, they send it again. The Asian calls the Titanic, no reply. Boat number D is lowered, 20 of 40 seats filled. This is the last boat that's launched from the Titanic. The CQD message repeats 4 times. 2:06, water is rising up to the A deck. The CQD message repeats another 4 times. Boat number D experiences issues while lowering. The aft fall jams. As a result, the bow touches the water while the rear is still 5 feet above the water. 2 passengers jump into the boat from the A deck. The water is already flowing over the A deck bulwark. At 2:06, Father Thomas Biles and Father Joseph from second class offer passengers absolution on the aft boat deck. 2:07, the Baltic messages Cape Race that Titanic signal is weak and they ask for status updates. Port list is now 7.0, head trim is 6.0. Cape Race replies to Baltic that they haven't heard from Titanic in half an hour and that their power may be gone. The port list is 7.0, head trim is now 7.0 as well. Titanic repeats the CQD message twice, then at 2:08, 4 more times, then at 2:09, 3 more times. The Virginian messages Titanic, cannot read your signal, you need to try your emergency set. Titanic sends an SOS message. At 2:10, Titanic designer Thomas Andrews tosses more deck chairs overboard. The port list is 7.0, head trim is now 8.0. Titanic sends their final message. CQD, Titanic, CQD, this is... The message is interrupted. Operators Jack Phillips and Harold Bride finally leave the wireless room to go to the boat deck. Bride works to dislodge boat number B, and Phillips runs with a large group of passengers toward the stern. He's never seen alive again. At 2:11, the port list is reduced to 6.0, head trim is 8.0. 2:12, port list is 6.0, head trim is now 9.0. At 2:13, boat number A is released from the roof of the officers' quarters, but it is stuck near the stairwell on the bridge behind the stern. 6 or 7 crew members rush to work to try to dislodge it. At 2:14, boat number B is also released from the roof of the officer quarters, but it lands upside down on the boat deck. Port list is now 5.0, head trim is 9.0. The passengers waiting for boat number A to be released give up and start running towards the stern. At 2:15, we now get drastic movement changes. The bow makes a slight dip downward, but enough to be noticeable, and the port list felt evened out. The decks even seemed to rise a few feet. Unfortunately, this causes a wave to flood the ship, reaching up to funnel 2. The wave wipes all the passengers in that area out into the sea, but it also unsticks boats number A and B. The chief baker leaves the A deck pantry when he hears a crash as if something has buckled, as if the iron was parting. When he reaches the deck, he is met with a mass of passengers running to the stern to escape the wave. People in lifeboats hear a cacophony of noise likened to thunder or explosions. First-class passenger Jack Thayer described it as, "It was like standing under a steel railway bridge while an express train passes overhead, mingled with the noise of a pressed steel factory and wholesale breakage of china." Funnel 1 topples, causing a whirlpool which pulls back in the people that had been washed off deck by the wave. At 2:16, the dome over the grand staircase caves in. The flooding water breaks the grand staircase. The lights go out, and then Funnel 2 topples. At 2:17, Titanic splits, almost in half. In the minutes between 2:18 and 2:20, the front portion of the ship sinks, pulling the aft, now vertical, down with it. By 2:20, the ship had disappeared from view, 2 hours and 40 minutes after striking the iceberg.